The story behind the 1975 Topps Herb Washington card actually begins in 1960 when Charles O. Finley purchased the Kansas City Athletics. Finley was known as a baseball experimenter, someone who liked to tinker with the rules and traditions of the game. He changed the team's name to the A's, introduced green and gold uniforms in 1963, and white shoes in 1967. He had a mechanical rabbit named Harvey that gave baseballs to the home plate umpire. One of Finley's best-known experiments were orange baseballs. Finley wanted the league to try them, reasoning that they were easier to see by both batters and fans. They were actually used in 2 exhibition games in 1973, but the experiment was a failure as the red laces made it difficult for batters to pick up the spin of the ball. Finley was a strong proponent of the designated hitter rule, which was adopted by the American League in 1973. But he wanted to take that further and have all teams employ an official designated runner. The designated runner would be stationed just outside the batter's box near the hitter and run for that batter as soon as he hit the ball. Of course, this rule was never adopted, though it was considered for a time by Commissioner Bowie Kuhn. It shouldn't come as any surprise then to know that Charlie Finley was a big proponent of using speed as an edge to win ball games. Finley often acted as the A's general manager, so he put those beliefs into practice. Starting as early as 1967, he promoted Allan Lewis, the Panamanian Express, as the team's primary pinch runner. From 1967 to 1973, Lewis split his time between the A's and the minor leagues, serving almost exclusively as a pinch runner for the A's. In fact, he had only 31 plate appearances in 156 games, making him one of a handful of players in Major League history to have more games played than at-bats. Lewis never received a card from Topps during his time in the majors. His biggest claim to fame was scoring the winning run in Game 7 of the 1972 World Series, giving Oakland their first World Championship. But Lewis also got thrown out stealing twice by Johnny Bench. Lewis played the 1973 World Series against the Mets, scoring a run, but he was never fully accepted by his teammates, who thought he was wasting a spot on the roster. He was only voted a 1/10 player share of the World Series bonus, and was released after the World Series. After the 1973 World Series, A's manager Alvin Dark was watching a track meet on TV and saw Herb Washington compete. Washington was a world-class sprinter and held world records in both the 50 and 60-yard dash. Charles Finley reached out to the 22-year-old, who initially thought it was a joke. He hadn't played baseball since high school. Herb Washington had to hold out for a $45,000 contract with a no-cut clause, along with a $20,000 sign-on bonus that mandated he grow a mustache. He signed on March 16, 1974. His position? Pinch runner. He would not make any appearances in the field or at the plate. When he was substituted into a game, his position was listed as DH.
One more baseball story. The Oakland A's are trying an experiment this spring. They've signed a sprinter, Herb Washington of Michigan State, as a possible pinch runner. Dick Hammer has the story.
Sprinter Herb Washington last played baseball in high school. The Michigan State star, world record holder in the indoor 50 and 60-yard dashes, signed last week with Oakland as a running specialist. His first day in camp included a refresher course on pickoff moves under the supervision of manager Alvin Dark.
I think really the main thing is getting him acclimated to standing at first base and watching the pitchers make different moves towards home and towards first. That's the main thing right now.
Washington got a look at the A's best, lefty Darrell Knowles. And he has pretty good move, doesn't he?
He sure does. He sure does. And they tell me he's the best in the business. So when you got somebody like that right there in your team, I know that I'll be ready for anyone else.
Did you begin to feel comfortable after the first couple of throws over there this morning?
I really did. You know, I kind of got loose, and it was a for real situation today because I'm sure that they know that if they can pick me off, that they should be able to pick off anyone else in the league. And I tell you, it's going to be a challenge right here in practice. I tell you, practice might be harder than some games for myself with Knowles and Lou and Odom and guys like that throwing over there.
Washington is assured of plenty of work this week. The A's have hired a tutor, former Major League base-stealing king Maury Wills of the Dodgers, to speed his development. Dick Hammer, NBC News, Mesa, Arizona.
Although Washington was perhaps the fastest person to ever play in the major leagues, he didn't have a lot of baseball instincts. He was thrown out in 4 of his first 5 stolen base attempts. Eventually, the rest of the 1974 season went pretty well for Washington. He played in 92 games and stole 29 bases, good for 7th in the American League in 1974. but he was also thrown out stealing 16 times, in addition to twice in the ALCS against Baltimore. Herb Washington had his moment in the national spotlight during Game 2 of the 1974 World Series in Los Angeles. It was the ninth inning. The A's were down by a run after Joe Rudi hit a single. With one out, Herb Washington was inserted as a pinch runner for Rudi. Cy Young winner Mike Marshall was on the mound.
The A's now have the tying run on first in the person of world-class sprinter Herb Washington, who replaces Rudi with one out. Washington, the A's designated runner, tells of his unique job as baseball's newest specialist.
When Mr. Finley signed me, his hopes were that I could win anywhere from 5 to 10 ball games. By Alvin Dark's count, I've won 8, so I would say that it has been successful.
Mike Marshall moves toward first, gets one strike on pinch hitter Angel Manuel, then plays cat and mouse with Washington. Marshall succeeds with a vital pickoff. And here's the replay with Herb Washington commenting on the action.
When I won the ball game, Alvin just said, pick up the sign for me and I'll let you know whether we want you to steal or not. I received the steal sign. I got a lead that I thought I was comfortable with. The first time Mike Marshall came to first base, it was a little bit deceptive in that I thought that was probably his best move. Took maybe another half a step on the lead, and that's the move of which he picked me off on.
With 2 out of the bases clear, Mike Marshall strikes out Angel Manuel, and the Dodgers tie the series at 1 game apiece with a 3-2 victory.
Although the pickoff might have soured Finley on Herb Washington, in spring training 1975, Finley doubled down. The A's had 3 pinch running specialists in camp. Matt Alexander and Don Hopkins joined Washington. Both of these players had legitimate baseball skills, especially Alexander. Herb Washington did make the team out of spring training, but by May had only played in 13 games and had 2 stolen bases. Herb Washington was released on May 5, 1975. As in some of my other videos, Herb Washington was already out of baseball before many collectors even got his Topps baseball card. This was not just Washington's only Topps card, it was the only pinch runner card in baseball history. It's got some unique statistics on the back, and you could jokingly argue that Topps could have listed no under bats and throws. Herb Washington left baseball with a unique record, the only man ever to appear in over 100 Major League games without a single at-bat or appearance in the field. The release of Herb Washington wasn't the end of Charlie Finley's experiment with pinch runners. He continued to retain at least one position on the roster for a pinch running specialist. He used Matt Alexander, Don Hopkins, Larry Lintz, and Darrell Lee Woodard at various times between 1976 and 1977. The 1976 A's hold a modern baseball record for stolen bases by a team, with 341. Although Herb Washington is the most famous of Charlie Finley's pinch runners, the most successful was undoubtedly Matt Alexander. In fact, Alexander might be the greatest pinch runner in Major League history. He pinch ran 271 times in his career, with 91 steals and 89 runs scored, all Major League records. And speaking of success, Herb Washington ironically might have the most successful post-baseball career of any of his former Oakland A's teammates. Mr. Washington is the CEO of HLW Fast Track Inc., which owns and operates about 24 McDonald's restaurants in Ohio and Pennsylvania. He's been on the board of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Washington also runs another company, Quest Wellness, that owns 2 cannabis facilities in Ohio. He also owns a minority interest in the Cincinnati Reds. The 1975 Topps Herb Washington is a unique and special card in our hobby. Feel free to leave your thoughts and comments about it below. And collect what you love.